Hello, everyone. I'm Emilio Coppola. I'm the executive director of the Godot Foundation. The talk is Building Godot, the process behind the engine. And there's a lot of information about what Godot is and how you can use it, but there's not a lot of information about how we make it. And it's not going to be a super long talk, so there's plenty of time at the end for questions. And we also have a lot of people who are actually part of the project around. So if you have more questions afterwards, you can hang out with us later. And just in case you got lost and you don't know what Godot is, it's just like an engine and an editor. I specifically say engine and editor because a lot of the engines that are out there only provide you with the framework to use it, but not with the full-blown editor. You can do 3D, 2D, VR stuff, everything you want, and it works on all the platforms, Windows, Mac, Linux, anything you need. And it's a very tiny download. It's only 64 megabytes to download the latest version. It's a zip file. You extract it, you open it, and get ready to go. And it's open source, like Blender or Linux or many of the other programs that are super cool. And yeah, you might know some of the games that are built in Godot. These are some of them: Brotato, Case of the Golden Idol, Backshot Roulette. At the beginning, it was very easy for us to know which games were done in Godot and who was the people behind them. But now there's so many that we just find out when they release and they're on Steam at top of the charts. And that's the first time we hear about it. So it's been quite good. And a lot of newcomers, not only to making games, but also like to Godot itself, are starting in game jams. This is one of the very popular game jams, the GMTK, which had like a huge increase in submissions in Godot games. A lot of people use this sort of game jams to try the engine out and stuff like that. So it's quite good to see that it's growing every year. This time we had like 70,700, like 37% of it was all made in Godot. And it's been 10 years since it has been open source. But you can clearly see that the past years have been growing very, very fast. That's something that we don't usually like see everywhere until like you wait until the end of the year and then you check on SteamDB and suddenly like in 2024 we have more than double of the games released in Steam than 2023. But like what happened between 2023 and 2024 to see such an increase? So Unity introduced some runtime fees, and a lot of people were freaking out about it. I don't know if you can guess in this graph when that happened. This is Google Trends data. And we got a lot of attention from a lot of people that suddenly like realized about us existing and trying it out. But we noticed that the people in the industry were not so familiar with open source solutions. I got a call from like a reporter from a big publication asking like, how did your team receive the news about the Unity thing at your office? And I was like, what office, right? Like we just a bunch of nerds in different places of the world. Like we don't have an office. People really, when they see the scale, they expect us to be a very big company with offices, hundreds of employees and stuff like that. But that's really not the case. We're a very, very small team at the foundation. At the Godot Foundation at the moment, we only have 13 people hired to work remotely all over the world. And we see each other at events like this one or the GodotCon, which are the places where we can meet in person. And, it's quite good. I try to compare, like, trying to find out how many people there are working on other big engines like Unity and Unreal. And it's a bit tricky. You can kind of get from the layoffs numbers, you can kind of extrapolate and see how many there are left. And it's around 5,000 people in each of the big companies, which is, orders of magnitude bigger than what we are. So how is it possible? How do we make it happen with so little people? Well, of course, like to compete with something like that, we need something that they don't really have, which is the community. Like, I know we are only 13 people at the foundation, but the community is really what's driving this forward. And it's what set us apart from any other traditional engines. The majority of the contributions that we get on the engine come from volunteers. And our work at the foundation is to enable them to do it and to patch the holes in areas where there's no one else or no one can do it. And we operate in the opposite way of a traditional company, which is, in this case, the community decides what we work on, and then we follow that direction. So community driven. So we took all that into account, the number that we are, like adding the people from the foundation, plus volunteers, plus people from companies, it's around 3,000 people, which brings it closer into the number of the other engines in terms of scale. But of course, not everybody of these 3,000 people work on it full time. Some of them just have a little time to work on it. Maybe some of them, they send one change and they never show up again. We never see them. But it's, it reflects a little bit better what the pace of the community is and how many people we are working on this. The majority of the work that we do happens on GitHub. I'm not sure if you use GitHub. If you're not a programmer, it's very overwhelming to see. It's very hard. But there is it has all the tools that we need. And we have 76 repositories in total in our organization that cover from everything you might want to have. But the main one is the Godot code one, the documentation, which is also there, and some demo projects. Those are the most popular things. The documentation, which was one of the weaker parts of the engine up until recently, I think, there has been a lot of improvements in it. When I joined, there wasn't a lot of coverage, but lately you can see it, and it's also localized to many languages, which is pretty cool. So if you're planning on picking up Godot and you know where to start, I really recommend the documentation, because a lot of YouTube tutorials might be a bit outdated, or they take a long time. They never teach you the fundamentals. In the documentation, you have everything from what you can do with it and what the specifics of each of the parts are, and it's always the source of truth. And the demo projects, you might have seen this image a lot. We used it more than we should. This is from the TPS demo. It's a bit dated, but it still gives us a lot of insights when we are testing new versions of the engine. We have over 100 demos that we use every time we make an update, and we test if we broke something or something like that. And they cover a lot of the features that the engine has. So if you're looking for a reference of how to do something, there's probably a demo about it. And yeah, we use those to test our releases. And then we have the proposals. Maybe it's too tiny to read. I didn't know the size of the screen, but the proposals is where people post what they want to improve on the engine, and they can be improvements to anything from the animation editor, new features to the scripting languages, improving the UX, everything. And people vote and share their opinions about what they want that feature to be. And we always are looking for consensus. So to open a proposal, it doesn't matter if you know how to code or not. You might have some issue while you're an artist and you say, I'm having issues doing this in particular, so you can describe what your problem is and propose some solutions. And maybe the solution that ends up getting implemented in the engine is not the one you propose, but the one that made sense for the whole thing. But that all happens in the proposals repository. And not everything is done on GitHub. We also do have some other places like Weblate, where you can go and contribute for translations, for various parts of the editor, or for the documentation. And it's also, Weblate is an open source platform that you can use, and anyone can go in and join and propose any changes. So we have an example, for instance, of the editor in Japanese, which is quite cool, but not everything is translated, but little by little people go and contribute small parts to it until we can have everything. And since there's a lot of people now learning how to make games with Godot, we really care about the accessibility side of things. And I think that a lot of people, when they hear the word accessibility, they think about visually impaired or high contrast, a lot of those usual features that you have on a game, but not so much language or the translation. And since we are a very diverse community of people, we have the engine translated to a lot of languages that those people might not even know how to read or speak English, so it's quite useful for them. And I think I'm very proud that it's the only editor that can do right to left languages, such as Arabic or Hebrew, so that's pretty cool. And that's also thanks to the community that made it possible. To organize all this work, we have different teams, and these teams are like for each of the areas of the engine. That makes it easier for us to split the work into different groups. And the teams are composed of people from three different groups, three categories, which are volunteers, foundation members, or companies. And you are welcome to join any of these teams. All the meetings are open, and you are always looking for new participants. And yeah, let's look more at these three main groups and how they interact between each other. And unfortunately, not all the teams have active maintainers, so some of them might be a bit slower, and that's where the foundation comes in and filling those gaps. But let's see how the volunteers work together with the foundation. This is, for example, a proposal by a user who was using the 3D editor and wanted to place a box inside a 3D scene with a plane, and there was no snapping. But there is this sort of snapping in other software, such as Blender, so they say, hey, it would be really cool that when I'm moving a box on a level, I can place it on top of another shape instead of having to fiddle with the gizmos and then placing it exactly where you want it to be. So after a bunch of positive reactions from this, somebody else, completely different, another volunteer came in and said that, hey, this is the code for doing this particular thing that was on that proposal. And that's when we start to consider, okay, like before merging everything to the code, like we need to make sure that does it follow the proper style guides for the project, for the code? Can we maintain it after we merge it? Because if we start merging everything, then nobody else wants to maintain it, it will be very chaotic. And we can't say yes to everything. So there's people who are in charge of trying to do this sort of review. So we make sure the code is up to standard, right? Like maybe this is not how we do it in this project. We all use C++, but there's a million ways of doing the same thing. So we try to make it as cohesive as possible with the rest of the engine. And once it passes this sort of requirements, then somebody responsible from that team is the one who has the final say on saying, yes, the code is all good, we like this feature, we want it, they approve it. So it gets added to a list of features that we're going to be merging to the engine in future releases. I will cover a little bit more how we do releases, but here is that same feature on the latest release that we had on Godot. It's finally there, so when you are using it, you know where it came from. If you want to know more a bit about the philosophy about when and how we add new features and all that, Juan gave at latest GodotCon a talk that goes more into detail about the philosophy of the process and all that. I won't go too much into detail, but it's also in our YouTube, so feel free to check it out. So now let's look at how companies collaborate with the project together with the foundation. In this case, there's two main ways in which a company can help Godot. The first one is by contributing developer time. This can be like a team of engineers that's working on a specific improvement, or they want to support a popular device or anything like that. So they have that people working and sending the code to us. And there's companies that have actually people hired that are working almost full time on making Godot improvements. And of course, all the changes that they submit, they have to go through the same process. So we need to check that the style is okay, that's something that we might be able to maintain, that the teams on that area, they like it and they approve it, and then they come to us. And it's quite nice because some of the features that people want, the community want, are very costly for us to do, or they are too big for just a volunteer to do. So that's a great way which companies contribute. Some of the most popular proposals that we had, which was having the game editor, like showing the game running inside the editor, was recently sponsored by W4 Games. And after the huge migration of users coming from Unity, they all wanted to press play and see the game running inside the editor. So that's something that they were able to sponsor. And also, like the talk that I'm giving here, or the presence we had previous years, was also sponsored by W4 Games. So those are things that the foundation don't have the funds to do, and that's where companies can help us out and have a presence here. And then the last category is when we work alone. That's mostly when we need to be the initiators of a feature. For instance, there was for a very long time an audio issue when you exported for web, that there was a lot of noise, crackling noise, and nobody was able to fix it. So we assigned some of our contractors to work on it, and following the same process as we do with everything else, it goes through the whole thing until it gets merged and fixed for everybody else to use. The only difference really between the foundation and the community contributions is that we usually work where nobody wants to work on it, right? But most of the time, these sort of contributions come from the community. And other things we do at the foundation, for instance, like in our website, we have a list of priorities, which is, like sort of like a roadmap that the community knows what kind of things we want to see implemented in the engine. This can be decided by each of the teams. So each of the teams that I described before, they have meetings, they discuss what are the things that they would like to see on the engine, and that helps us out because if you are a company that wants to sponsor some sort of development, you know from which areas there's more need. If you're a volunteer that wants to contribute for the first time, you can go and decide, okay, this is an area that the team wants to fix, or like the community at large wants to fix, so you can contribute there. Or it helps us know which sort of positions we need to fill in the foundation to fix these sort of issues that people most commonly have. We also host a yearly poll. We ask all sorts of questions for everyone, like how people use Godot, what their experience is with it, like where they want to publish games and things like that, what hardware do they use. And this helps us also inform ourselves in terms of what are the needs from people. If nobody's using a feature, if nobody cares about a certain aspects of it, we just move on and do some other things. But if there is anything that we need to actually track, we keep year by year comparisons. And I know that polls are not the best way of knowing these sort of things, but since we don't have any analytics on the engine, we ask the community to give us that information, and we have 10,000 submissions last time. So I think it's good enough in terms of to get the sentiment and the spread of users. Did you know that 25% of the users don't have any version control whatsoever? Isn't that exciting? So going back to the code, and I showed before, there's many different things that we need to do, like reviewing the issues, making sure that the code is good and all that. And we have a very, very high volume of contributions. In our project, I think it's one of the most active open source projects presently. We recently got to 100,000 issues and PRs, which is a lot. And a lot of people, when they come and visit the GitHub page, they see that we still have almost 12,000 issues open. So it's very scary. But the pacing of development and all that is not the whole picture is not here. It's mostly that we have 44,000 closed issues, which is the ratio between those two that really we take into account in terms of how things are going. And we are working very hard to make this number decrease. But of course, for doing that, we need to hire more people or get more contributions, and it will take time. So once we get a lot of those contributions into the engine, they keep coming, we keep approving them, and they get into the engine. We create some snapshots, and this is a development version of the engine that you can download and you can test out, and that's where we see how people are interacting with it. Sometimes we publish a snapshot, nobody says anything. Some other times we publish a snapshot and everybody's like, hey, you broke my entire project, and I'm not using version control, so it's your fault. And yeah, we take this area, this part of the project, the snapshot phase, to mostly be merging the most risky stuff. Every new feature, everything that might be super big, we merge it here, and we break everything we might need breaking. And afterwards, when we know that all the big features got in and that everything that we wanted to include is there, we start another release phase, which is the beta phase. and that's where we mostly focus on fixing things. And in this period, there is a feature freeze, so we're not going to be merging any new features. All that is on this release is already there. We only focus on merging bugs. That doesn't mean that we're not working on any other features, because that happens. But if you want to try them out, you have to compile them yourself or wait until the next window. But yeah, it's really like mostly fixing issues. And then we get to the release candidate, which is when we think that the release might be already good. So we try it out and we say, okay, this might be the new release. And that's where it's very important for us, because a lot of people are waiting for these releases to try out their project, and they start making the transition from a previous version to the new one. And that's when they find a lot of things that might not happen, but we get a lot of attention on this. And also for content creators, it's very important, because if they want to prepare some materials, some videos about the next release or things like that, they already know what the release is going to look like. And even if it's not the final version, they already have very close to final. And once we fix everything on there, we're very happy. Everybody is like sure that we don't need any more release candidates. Then finally, we get to the final release. On a beautiful website. I tried to make a collage here with some features, but they didn't fit. So you should visit the website, which is much better. It has a lot of nice animations, and it includes all the features that got included in there. We released 4.4 just before the GDC, so it's fresh out of the oven. You can try it out. And yeah, the thing with these releases and the different pieces of the project, the volunteers, the foundation, and the companies, some features might take a longer time to develop and maybe a longer time to get merged and released. That's why, for instance, the example I gave before, the feature, like the proposal was open in 2020, but the fix got released now in 2025. So it's 5 years of waiting for Godot for a single feature. That's not super ideal, but like if there's no one who can make it happen, or if we don't have the funds to hire someone to work on it, a lot of it will just take longer. This is, of course, a very extreme example that I wanted to show, because some other times we take only 9 minutes until a bug is reported, until it gets fixed, which is like two sides of that coin. But yeah, like we still need a lot of people to be reviewing all that. I don't know if that was very tiny to read. I should have made everything bigger, but yeah. And the easier you make it for us to fix it, the faster it will be. So if you submit an issue that you're having with your game, but you don't tell us when it happens, it's like the Windows closes when I press play, and we have no information. It's really hard for us to figure that out. So the more information there is, the easier it will be for us or for someone to go in and fix it. But of course, this happens at a very constant pace, and for doing that, like we still need a lot of people. But in regards to speed, I think that it's pretty common for open source projects to be very slow in comparison to big companies, because maybe we cannot go as fast because we don't have these huge teams that I talked before. We don't have a building full of engineers working on it, but we still going all the time, slowly but surely, fixing everything. And I think at the end of the road, we end up being faster and a longer scale, right? Like companies come and go, but we always stay at a constant pace, and it's kind of like the turtle and the hare. But yeah, our focus is to make the engine the best it can be, and we do everything we can. But for doing all that, we need funding, and we cannot really do that without money. So where is the money coming from? It's one of the most difficult issues in open source projects. The conversation comes up a lot, and when we explain it, a lot of people tell us, okay, if the Godot engine is a non-profit based in the Netherlands, why don't you get some European grants or things like that? I've heard that X and Y project got like €1 billion to work on it, and like, have you tried? And yeah, we tried, but unfortunately the system is not really for projects like ours. We're working with some people at other open source organizations to change this, but it's going to take some time. But more often than not, these sort of grants are designed for trendy features like, hey, do you want to implement AI in your project, or you want to implement latest crypto thing? And that's not something that we want to do. And people hire these teams to develop some specific features just for getting the grant, and then try to funnel a part of that money to the project. But I don't think that that's worth it. But if any of you know good ways to get grants, please let me know, because I'm interested still. But yeah, how we got actually most of the funding is through donations, directed donations. This is, like the main thing we do, and there isn't any feature locked behind a donation wall. So everything that you donate is because you want us to keep improving the engine, but you're never gonna have like a different tier of Godot Engine for donators and Godot Engine for everybody else. Everything is always free for everyone. We started using Patreon like many other projects do, but they got a lot of money in fees. So we were able to develop our own platform to avoid having to spend a lot of money on that. And we have like a lot of donators there, and also companies sponsoring. Good thing is, like, up until now, like, most of the funding is half and half between individuals and companies. So we don't have any dependence on one company that if they stop donating, we just cannot operate anymore. We still have a lot of runway to keep working. And we use this, as I said, to hire more people to keep working on reviewing those proposals, trying to make new fixes, and supporting everything else. And every time we make a release, we do get a spike in donations. And why do we see an increase after every release? Well, we have this super secret marketing hack that when you click on download, you see a pop-up saying, hey, do you want to donate? And, I think reminding people that they can donate is a very powerful thing, especially not for the first time they use it, but for the second time that they are upgrading it, because then they consider, okay, I've been using this for a while, maybe I can start donating, right? It has been working well for me. So I think it's quite good. There's other methods to do this. This is how the Blender website looked in December. It's a bit ugly. It's the Wikipedia method, right? Like just half of the page in orange saying, hey, please give us money. But it works. It works really well. So you can kind of imagine what will happen on our website on December. Just a spoiler alert. Another thing we do is conferences. We have a yearly GodotCon. They happen mostly in Europe, but we have our first one now in the US. But yeah, the events, it's a great way for us to finance it. And we charge for the ticket, but then all the talks are uploaded publicly for everyone to see. They are all posted on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we have talks from 2017, which is almost like 10 years now there. The quality isn't that good, but it will keep improving. But yeah, as a reminder, like we have in May, the GodotCon in Boston is the first one we do here in the US. So if you want to come, there's still some tickets left that we're going to be adding soon. And one of the reasons why we did it there was also in the poll, the most answered city where they wanted us to go was Boston. And there was also a local group in Boston that wanted to help us out organize the event. So we got together with them, and in a similar process as we do everything else, we made it happen. And thanks to our logo not being just a geometrical shape of black and white things, we just were able to add some legs and arms. And then we made a plushie that was very good. And with initiatives like this, we were able to hire somebody to work on the project like half, not full time, but half time. And we are exploring a little bit how we can do this sort of marketing, like merch and stuff like that, just to finance the project. But it's not our main priority. Our main priority is always working on the engine. Even before we got the plushie, there was like a copy in Alibaba, which is really funny. That's how we look like after every of these conferences. That's a little bit like how we are, but yeah. And we are also working on an asset store. And we're going to be releasing a public beta very soon. And we don't want to make the engine grow indefinitely, adding every feature under the sun. And I think it's very important for us, and we've been working very hard in making it very easy to extend it. So the idea would be to help other people in the ecosystem to be able to publish easier. And at the moment, you can do it, but it's only free assets. But in the future, you will be able to also sell some assets. And I hope that a lot of the things that we cannot cover, some other people can through plugins. Um, we do develop some official plugins like the XR tools and stuff like that, that if you are making a VR game, you can download a set of templates and use them, but they are always free. So, it will be easier for you to get them there, but yeah. So, the answer to the question kind of at the beginning, like how we build Godot, basically the community is the major force behind Godot. The foundation does what the community can't, and every feature follows the same path. Doesn't matter where it's coming from, they always need to be reviewed, approved, and if they fix something that is important for you to make a game, we make it happen. And the ultimate goal we have is to make making games as good as possible. That's our priority, and that's what we're going to be keep working on. And if you see that we are slower in the other fronts, like the asset store, like the conferences, all that, it's because we are most of us focusing on the game. So that was it. I don't know if you have any questions. Feel free to ask. We're going to have somebody help me going with the microphone around. I know I've been through a lot of things very quickly, but feel free to ask anything. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, this one is working. Okay.
Hello? I'm going to be starting to dig into Go.
Yeah.
I'm going to be digging into Go after GDC. I didn't have.
It's a bit low. I cannot hear you. So.
Okay. Does Godot have built-in multiplayer game creation tools?
Sorry, I cannot hear it properly.
Does Godot have built-in multiplayer creation tools? I haven't looked into it in depth.
Yeah, we do have some basic multiplayer creation things inside the editor. There's a different sort of nodes and libraries that you can use, but it really depends on what kind of game you're building. It makes sense to use the default stuff or use some third-party services. You can use the same that you use with any other engine in those, but you have to implement it yourself or download like some implementations that exist. But yeah.
Any questions?
There's a couple there.
You said it yourself. In comparison to other engines, Godot is moving slower. And I feel like most of the bigger companies won't get to Godot because of that reason. But do you mind that the bigger companies don't care at the moment?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Do you feel like the big companies not looking at Godot or not using Godot is a problem at the moment, or do you feel like it is just part of the process that the community builds it first and maybe then some bigger studios are built using Godot?
Yeah. So we don't have any like super big company. There's a couple that I know of that are making games in Godot, but that's not really our priority because our priority is making the current users have the best tool that they can have, right? So we don't have any marketing team that's reaching out to new studios and hey, you should try to use it and all that, because there isn't any interest other than getting maybe more donations, that there is no interest in us in growing indefinitely, right? That's why we also try to help and foster other communities that are making other sort of engines, like could be Default, could be Lua, which was used to make Balatro. I think the most important thing that we want to bring is the concept that you can use open source in the gaming industry and that there's a lot of things that we can share. But like it would be nice to have a AAA game built in Godot, but at the same time, like it's not something that we are actively looking for. So I think if we keep improving it, eventually it will happen. And again, I know of a couple of projects that are quite big that are happening, but we'll see with time what happens.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you for having this talk. This was great. And my question is, what is kind of the ultimate end goal for Godot as a game engine? Like, what kinds of features are you guys like looking forward to that you want to implement? And is there like a stopping point in which it's like, okay, the engine is fully featured enough where if people want additional things, they can just make custom stuff or use plugins and all that?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I think that's a question that we ask ourselves every time there's a proposal that a lot of people like. It's like, okay, is this impacting most of the users or not? One common example is the 3D editor, right? Like the 3D like terrain editor, which a lot of people want. But a lot of people at the same time are making 2D games, which, if we want to keep the download size to be very tiny and us being able to maintain it, we want to keep it lean. That's why the asset store, I hope, will kind of help in that sort of thing. Like, okay, not everything is included, but you can download these extra things. We do include a lot. We have a lot of things on the engine already, and most of the things that are not present there, you can actually do. I think Godot is very extensible, so you can create a lot of tools for the rest of your team very easily. But yeah, our goal is to not add everything under the sun, and that's why those other initiatives are happening. In terms of like the things that might come in the future, that's where we have the priority list, where you can kind of guess what happened, and that's reflecting the sentiment from the poll, from the other places where we ask people. But it's usually not a lot of features. It's mostly like making the things that are already there work better. So it's a tricky question, and it's yeah, no problem.
Hi, thanks for the talk. One thing I was wondering is there any plans to re-release the Godot plushie?
Yes, yes, there are plans of doing it. Yeah. We are looking actually into a way of having a permanent store with the plushie, because how Makeshift operates is that you set up like a one limited only thing, and then you create this fear of missing out, and then people want it again. So we are discussing with them a way for us to have it always there, so you don't have to wait until it's available. But again, that's you have to review all that contract and all that like logistics, and we have a lot of other things to do. So it is coming, but might be in a month or so, or two, I don't know. But it will be coming back. And we are also working on another plushie as well. So that's good.
Hi, thanks for the talk. One issue with open source software is that it can be forked and there can be competing standards. It seems like Godot's done a pretty good job of managing this. What steps have you kind of done, maybe proactively, to make sure that this is not a large or growing issue?
So for competing standards, you mean like, for instance, in 3D models or stuff like that? Or what kind of things you mean? Because, for instance, in things that are like, for instance, 3D models, we advocate for having GLTF, which is an open standard, trying to compare that with other implementations in things like Blender, so we know that the interoperability is very good. But there's also proprietary things that we cannot really touch. We have to touch sometimes, but it's not ideal. But can you be more specific, maybe? Or
Yeah, more so with just the engine code itself and making sure that there is one source of truth with a community and managing it towards a shared unified direction. It seems like you guys have done it.
well, I think Godot itself is quite flexible enough, so you can do the same thing in different ways. And you can always code that low level as you want. You can do stuff in C++. You can only do, if you want, can do things on a scripting language. You can include other sort of languages to it. So it's very extensible. So if you have a workflow already in your team and you want to transition from another engine to Godot, you will very likely be able to keep using the same tools that you were using, but using Godot as the engine itself. So yeah, there isn't one way of doing it properly. And Juan, in that talk, he covered a little bit about this, right? Like when you're building an engine for one specific game, then yes, it makes sense to have one way of doing things, and then you teach the people on that studio how to use it, how to make it work, and that's it. But when you have thousands of studios using the same software with a different like pipeline and different ways of doing things, then you need to be a bit more flexible. So we do everything we can to make it as easy as possible.
Thanks.
Hello. If you were interested in getting more involved with the community, helping build plugins, features, that kind of thing, how would you recommend getting started with that?
Okay, so on our website, when you open it, there's a button at the top that says how to contribute. And in there, you will have a guide if you want to contribute code, where you can go if you want to help out with anything else like translations, with documentation, with anything. There's a guide in there. It's a bit text heavy. We would like to make a nice page later in the future, like to make it easier to find your way around. But we do have like everything happening in the open, so it's just knowing where you want to go. Like if you go to the Discord, for instance, you're only gonna find other people making games. But if you come to our private, not like it's open, right? But the Rocket Chat, which is like an open source version of Slack, then is where all the conversations happen about implementation of things. You can also do it on GitHub, etc. So go to the website and at the top, how to contribute, and you will find different ways to contribute. I myself, I got involved in the project helping out with the website. That's how I started. I did a lot of tutorials at the beginning and I helped with the website. So it's not only like we're only looking for people that does code, right? Like if you're a good designer, if you have like some other expertise, right? Like it's super nice to have those. The demos that we have, it would be nice to make them maybe prettier. So if you are a game developer and you want to contribute in that way, you can also do that. So yeah, there's many ways.
Was there somebody?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of other attempts at open source game engines, and my question is, why do you think Godot has been able to?
Can you?
Okay.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of other open source game engine attempts, and I'm wondering why you think Godot has been able to sort of stand out from the rest of the pack and have a prolonged life.
Yeah. So I think what makes Godot stand out is the ease of use. A lot of other engines are only code, right? Like if you don't know how to code, you cannot really get into them. And providing the editor with all the tools made it very simple for a lot of people to have everything in one package. I think that's one of the main issues, right? Like I tried and I keep trying many other solutions, and it's a bit harder sometimes to find tutorials, but we do have a lot of tutorials from a lot of very talented people. And since the Unity thing happened, I think that it also accelerated the adoption, and more people are starting to create this sort of content. So it's difficult to say. I would say that the reality is how easy it is to use, the main reason why people stick. The language that we use for coding, GDScript, I don't hear anyone, and I haven't seen anyone complaining that it was hard. Everybody that wants to use it, they start using it, and that's it. Maybe they complain that there's not enough features. Maybe they want to see something else. But nobody complains of it being hard. And I think that's very, very important if you compare it with other solutions. There's also a lot of elitism, I would say, in terms of like some seasoned developers wanting the languages to have static typing, and everything has to have all these sort of features that are nice, but for a newcomer are very aggressive. And since we make it optional, people can opt in the complexity that they want to add. They can enforce types, but they can also have everything dynamically typed as you do in Python and other things like that. So I think that's the cool thing about it. If you are very new to the scene, you can start making things, and then when you get better, you can keep using that. I myself was using Game Maker before I discovered Godot, and the thing that happened with that is that once you learn a lot of things about it, you find that wall where you cannot continue, right? Like you don't have access to the code, you don't have access to add any new features, and you are completely at the whim of this company. So I think that the fact that you can go from nothing to a top developer in Godot helps a lot for people sticking out. And yeah.
With the big companies, we often see a lot of issues with deprecated or abandoned features as like corporate winds change. How does Godot try to avoid those things and make sure that like things that have been added stay, get maintained, get expanded upon, especially with a community that has wildly different desires that could shift over time?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually. We did remove some stuff not so long ago when we did the Godot 4 release. We removed visual scripting, which was not very well implemented at the time. And we use things like the poll to know how many people were using it, and it was a very, very small number of people using it. And there are better like plugins that work, much better. So when we deprecate something, we make sure that it's something that people don't use and that there's a better alternative than one we have. Another example would be the physics engine. A lot of people were using Jolt for Godot 4, and our engine wasn't, our physics engine wasn't so fleshed out. So we are now in a process of adding Jolt as the physics engine. But how we do it is we keep the old one still, and we make it so that you can keep using it as long as you want, but we will flag it in the engine, tell you this is deprecated, this is a documentation page on how you can upgrade it into a new version. There will be a guide on the documentation about how to do it, even sometimes automated tools, like for the tile editor that we improved, for the parallax node, we improved it also, we provided you with tools. And then when enough people are using the new version, we can phase out the other solution. And still, since this is open source, and if your team really, really wants to do it in that way, you can compile that as an extension and keep adding it to the engine after we removed it. Of course, not everybody is going to be doing that, but I think that we haven't removed a lot of features. And if we do a new version of it that's better, we make sure that the transition is as easy as possible. So yeah, it depends a lot on each of the different cases, right? Some things are easier to replace, some others not, but we try to do the best. Yeah.
Another question?
Okay, well, we're going to be around here, and tomorrow there's a meetup in the Yerba Buena Parks at 2 p.m., I think. So you can check on our Blue Sky to see it, and we're all going to be there. I have some extra pins if you want some and stuff like that. So yeah, feel free to stay, and thank you so much.